Imagine waking up every morning knowing that someone you've never met controls every move you make. Your children can't walk to school without fear. Your business can't open without paying protection fees. Even the police, the very people sworn to protect you, whisper instead of speaking out loud. This isn't a scene from a crime thriller. It's real life for an entire town that, for years, was gripped by a gang so violent, so cunning, that it turned ordinary streets into a battlefield of silent terror. At first, it happened quietly. A few strange faces appeared on street corners. Local shopkeepers received polite but unsettling visits. "A small contribution will keep your family safe," the strangers said with cold smiles. Some refused, and their windows shattered overnight. Cars were set ablaze. Word spread quickly: pay up or disappear. Soon, the gang's reach extended everywhere. They dictated business hours, collected taxes on every sale, and even decided who could marry whom. The town's heartbeat changed. Laughter died in the markets, and doors stayed bolted after sunset. Children stopped playing outside. Teachers began dismissing classes early, afraid of what might happen after dark. Authorities tried to act, but corruption seeped through the ranks like a slow poison. A few brave officers went undercover, only to be exposed and forced into hiding. Every attempt to push back was met with brutal retaliation, fires, kidnappings, and unexplained disappearances. Residents lived in a constant state of dread, waiting for the next knock on the door. Yet, in the shadows, a quiet resistance grew. Ordinary citizens, shopkeepers, parents, even teenagers, began collecting evidence, sharing coded messages, and feeding critical information to outside investigators. Risking everything, they decided enough was enough. This is the story of how one ruthless gang tightened its grip on an unsuspecting town, and how a community, battered but unbroken, fought back. It's a tale of fear, power, and unimaginable courage, a true account of people who refuse to surrender their homes, their families, and their freedom. Stay with us as we reveal the chilling rise of these gangs, the dark methods they use to control every corner of daily life, and the remarkable struggle that finally shattered their reign of terror. Because understanding how a small group of criminals can enslave an entire town is the first step to making sure it never happens again. The quiet mountain town once felt like a postcard. Cobblestone streets lined with small bakeries, neighbors who greeted each other by name, and children racing their bicycles down gentle hills. But as dusk fell, an unfamiliar tension settled in the air. Windows were shuttered earlier, dogs barked at shadows, and shop owners exchanged nervous glances. Rumors of a new crew circulated first in hushed gossip, then in frantic whispers. No one knew where these men came from, but everyone sensed they meant business. The first real warning arrived on a foggy Tuesday. A family-owned grocery store woke to find its windows smashed and a crude symbol spray-painted across the door. A jagged crown, the mark of the gang calling itself the Iron Fangs. A note fluttered on the threshold: "Pay or vanish." Within hours, residents understood the message wasn't just for that shop. It was for everyone. Business owners soon discovered that refusing to pay the so-called security tax meant broken inventory, threats to children, or worse. Farmers bringing produce to market were intercepted on rural roads, their goods seized and trucks burned. The gang's strategy was methodical: choke the town's economy until submission became the only option. Within months, the once bustling market square echoed with silence. Ordinary life twisted into something unrecognizable. School teachers debated whether lessons were worth the risk when armed lookouts loitered near playgrounds. Couples postponed weddings, fearing large gatherings would attract gang attention. Streetlights became symbols of defiance. Each time one flickered out, no one dared replace the bulb. Even local festivals, the town's pride and joy, disappeared from the calendar. The Iron Fangs had stolen not only safety, but also the very rhythm of daily existence. Law enforcement struggled from the start. A few officers were bribed into silence, while others received menacing midnight phone calls reminding them that their families were being watched. When a young constable attempted to arrest 2 gang members for extortion, his patrol car was found in flames the next morning. Higher authorities dispatched special units, but every plan leaked before action could be taken. Someone inside the system was feeding the gang information, and trust evaporated. For residents, survival meant compromise. A bakery owner quietly doubled his prices to cover the tax, praying customers wouldn't ask why. Parents rehearsed escape routes with their children, down alleyways, across rooftops, should a raid begin. Conversations at dinner tables turned from weather and schoolwork to whispered reports of who'd paid up and who had disappeared. The entire community lived in a state of collective hostage. Yet even in this atmosphere of fear, sparks of defiance glimmered. A retired teacher began documenting incidents in a hidden journal, mapping gang movements and noting license plates of suspicious vehicles. A teenage delivery boy used coded language to pass updates to a distant relative in the provincial police. Farmers started leaving subtle chalk marks on barns to warn neighbors of patrols. These quiet acts of resistance were small, but together they wove a fragile network of hope. When an unexpected blackout plunged the town into darkness one night, many assumed the gang had cut power to stage another attack. Instead, it was a chance occurrence, a fallen tree during a storm, but it forced families to huddle close, whispering plans and promising each other they wouldn't live like this forever. In the heavy silence, a realization spread. Fear might control their movements, but it hadn't killed their resolve. As weeks turned into months, that resolve would become the gang's first real opponent, setting the stage for a confrontation no one in the town would ever forget. The Iron Fangs believed they had mastered the town, but power has a way of breeding overconfidence. As their grip tightened, their crimes grew bolder: daylight robberies, public beatings, and open-air arms deals that mocked whatever authority remained. What they didn't realize was that their own arrogance was planting the seeds of downfall. Outside the town, a handful of regional investigators were quietly piecing together fragments of information. Reports of similar symbols in neighboring areas, intercepted messages about drug routes, and unexplained cash movements began to form a pattern. A specialized task force was assembled, but they faced a critical problem. Without trusted voices inside the town, their strategy was blind. That's when the hidden network of residents began to matter. The retired teacher's meticulous journal, smuggled out by a visiting cousin, became a vital roadmap. The teenage delivery boy's coded updates revealed meeting spots and weapon caches. Farmers who once feared speaking out now left anonymous tips using prepaid phones. Each clue was small, a license plate here, a name there, but together they painted a vivid picture of the gang's hierarchy and routines. Meanwhile, the gang sensed cracks in their dominance. A few extortion payments arrived late. Graffiti mocking their crown emblem appeared on alley walls. Paranoia set in. Leaders demanded harsher punishments to reassert control, which only deepened resentment among townspeople already stretched to their emotional limits. What the gang mistook for loyalty was merely terror, and terror eventually burns out. The breakthrough came when a brave informant, a mid-level gang member disillusioned by the constant violence, approached the task force through a secure contact. He provided the location of a weapons stash and details of an upcoming cash handoff. It was the opportunity investigators needed, but executing a plan required perfect timing and absolute secrecy. Any leak could trigger another wave of retaliation. Preparations unfolded like a high-stakes chess match. Under the guise of a regional infrastructure project, plainclothes officers began entering the area, mapping escape routes and safe houses. Surveillance drones captured late-night movements. Communication with locals remained tight and coded. Even a casual glance in the wrong direction could expose months of planning. When the operation finally launched, it began before dawn. Teams swept in from multiple directions, silently surrounding key hideouts. The first arrests occurred without a shot fired. Sleeping gang sentries had no chance to warn their leaders. Within an hour, heavily armed units raided the main compound, where the Iron Fang's top brass gathered. Startled and disoriented, several attempted to flee through a back alley, only to meet barricades set by undercover officers. The town awoke to the distant thrum of helicopters and the sharp bark of commands over loudspeakers. For a moment, many residents feared the worst, a violent showdown that would spill blood on their streets. Instead, they witnessed something almost surreal. The feared gang leaders marched out in handcuffs, their once intimidating swagger replaced by stunned silence. Even as arrests continued, the danger wasn't over. Small pockets of loyalists attempted retaliatory strikes, but they were quickly subdued. Crucially, the task force had planned not just for the raid, but for what came after. Securing evidence, freezing assets, and protecting key witnesses. With leaders detained and their financial lifelines severed, the gang's structure collapsed like a house of cards. For the first time in years, the town's evening air carried no echo of menace. Parents unlocked windows, children played on porches, and merchants reopened long-shuttered shops. Yet amid the relief was a lingering unease. Memories of fear do not vanish overnight. Still, as neighbors gathered in the town square under a sky free of watchful eyes, they knew they had endured something extraordinary. A victory earned not only by law enforcement, but by their own quiet courage and determination to reclaim their lives. The morning after the raid felt almost unreal. Sunlight spilled over rooftops that had long seemed cloaked in permanent shadow. People stepped cautiously onto streets that had been silent for years, blinking against the brightness as if unsure the nightmare was truly over. A few merchants opened their shutters halfway, testing the air. Others simply stood on doorsteps, trading incredulous smiles. For the first time in memory, no armed lookouts watched from corners. The oppressive weight of fear had lifted, leaving behind an unfamiliar sensation: freedom. But freedom came with questions. Who had betrayed the Iron Fangs from within? Could the gang regroup under a new name or leader? Authorities assured residents that the captured leaders faced charges ranging from racketeering to homicide, and that their assets were frozen. Still, many locals worried about hidden members who had slipped through the net. The task force worked quickly, combing through financial records, interrogating arrested lieutenants, and dismantling weapon caches. Roadblocks around the town remained for weeks to ensure no resurgence. Rebuilding trust among neighbors proved just as challenging as rooting out the criminals. Years of intimidation had sown suspicion. Who had paid the gang willingly, and who had secretly helped the resistance? Old friendships frayed when rumors surfaced of families who might have profited by cooperating. Community meetings became emotional arenas where residents vented years of fear and anger. Some demanded harsh punishment for anyone who had aided the gang, while others urged forgiveness to help the town heal. Local leaders realized that without visible progress, the psychological scars might never fade. They organized volunteer patrols and invited mental health counselors to provide support. Streetlights, long neglected, were repaired and switched on in a symbolic gesture of reclaimed safety. Children tentatively returned to playgrounds. Shops reopened with cautious optimism, each new business hour a quiet act of defiance against the gang's memory. Economic recovery began with small but significant steps. Farmers who had once paid taxes to transport their goods now negotiated openly with markets in neighboring regions. The town council, freed from corruption, secured government grants to restore infrastructure and attract tourism. A community center was renovated to host job training programs for youth, a deliberate strategy to prevent the desperation that had once made gang life appealing. Perhaps the most profound transformation occurred in the collective mindset. Residents who had spent years feeling powerless discovered their own strength. The quiet courage of those who had passed coded messages, documented crimes, and shared intelligence became public knowledge. At a special ceremony in the town square, officials honored these unsung heroes, their names read aloud to thunderous applause. For many, it was the first time they could publicly acknowledge the risks they had taken. National media soon picked up the story, broadcasting it as a rare example of a community standing firm against organized crime. Journalists interviewed shopkeepers who had refused to abandon their businesses, parents who had secretly coached children on emergency escape plans, and the retired teacher whose detailed notes guided the final operation. Their stories inspired other towns facing similar threats, showing that resistance, though dangerous, could succeed when fueled by collective resolve. Months later, when the last roadblock was removed, the town celebrated with a festival unlike any it had ever known. Music filled the streets where silence once reigned. Lanterns glowed from every doorway, their warm light reflecting the spirit of renewal. People danced late into the night, a living testament to survival and unity. The scars of the Iron Fang's reign would never disappear completely, but they served as powerful reminders. Fear can paralyze, but it can also forge resilience. The town's journey, from terror and submission to courage and triumph, proved that even the most ruthless gang cannot permanently extinguish the will of a determined community. And as dawn broke on the festival's second day, the town finally felt whole again, its people free to dream of a future no longer defined by fear. Years passed, yet the story of the town's ordeal remained a touchstone for both residents and outsiders. Children who once cowered behind locked doors grew into teenagers curious about the days when their parents fought a quiet war. Teachers introduced special lessons about the era of fear, encouraging students to interview elders and record their memories. These conversations, sometimes painful, sometimes cathartic, helped ensure that the Iron Fang's dark legacy would not be forgotten or repeated. Local government embraced transparency as a guiding principle. Monthly town hall meetings allowed anyone to raise concerns about crime, infrastructure, or governance. Officials posted budgets publicly and invited independent audits, a direct response to the corruption that had allowed the gang to thrive. Trust in law enforcement slowly rebounded as new officers, many of them locals, joined the ranks with a pledge to serve openly and honestly. The station that once symbolized intimidation became a community hub where residents dropped in for coffee and conversation. Economic life steadily flourished. A cooperative farmers market formed, drawing visitors from nearby regions eager to taste organic produce and hear the town's remarkable story. Small guest houses and cafes sprang up to welcome tourists. Formerly shuttered workshops reopened as studios for artisans, whose crafts reflected both tradition and the resilience of recovery. What had once been a place people fled now became a destination that celebrated endurance and creativity. The cultural revival spurred a sense of pride that transcended the trauma. Annual festivals honored the quiet heroes who had risked everything during the gang's reign. At one event, the retired teacher who kept the clandestine journal stood before a crowd of hundreds, reading passages that once had been life-threatening secrets. Listeners wept openly as they heard about coded chalk marks and late-night data drops. Each detail underscored how ordinary individuals, shopkeepers, farmers, delivery boys, had collectively outwitted a violent enterprise. But healing was not without complications. A handful of former gang associates, after serving prison time, sought to reintegrate into society. Some residents resisted, fearing old wounds would reopen. Community leaders organized reconciliation circles, inviting victims and former perpetrators to speak in a moderated setting. While not every meeting ended in forgiveness, many participants described a sense of release simply from being heard. These efforts helped prevent cycles of vengeance and underscored the community's commitment to lasting peace. The town's story began to influence policy beyond its borders. Regional officials studied the methods used by both the gang and the citizens to understand how organized crime embeds itself and how grassroots intelligence can disrupt it. Training programs for rural police departments highlighted the importance of community trust and early intervention. What had started as a local tragedy evolved into a case study in resilience for an entire country. On the 10th anniversary of the gang's downfall, the town organized a commemoration unlike any previous celebration. Lanterns illuminated every street, symbolizing vigilance and hope. Families who had once hidden indoors now marched together in a luminous parade, carrying signs that read, "Never again." A monument in the central square, simple stone etched with the names of those who resisted, was unveiled to ringing church bells and the steady applause of hundreds. As night settled over the festivities, a sense of closure mingled with forward-looking optimism. The town understood that safety is never guaranteed. Vigilance must remain constant. Yet they also recognized their collective strength. They had confronted terror not with weapons alone, but with unity, patience, and the courage to act when silence seemed safer. What began as a terrifying chapter of domination had transformed into a testament to human resolve. The Iron Fangs had sought to enslave a community, but instead, they forged a legacy of solidarity. The lesson echoed through every speech, every dance, every shared smile that evening. Fear may visit, but it cannot rule a people who choose to stand together. Today, the town stands as a quiet testament to what ordinary people can accomplish when they refuse to surrender to fear. Visitors arriving for the first time might see only the tidy streets, the colorful murals, and the cheerful market stalls. They might never guess that these same streets once belonged to ruthless criminals who believed they could hold an entire population captive. Yet every corner carries a memory for those who lived through it, and those memories fuel a deep determination to keep the community strong. The once abandoned railway depot is now a bustling cultural center where local artists display paintings inspired by the town's journey. One striking mural shows a cracked crown, symbol of the Iron Fangs, being overtaken by blooming wildflowers. Children who were babies during the gang's rule proudly guide tourists through exhibits, recounting the resilience of their parents and grandparents. For them, the story is not just history. It's a living lesson in courage and cooperation. Local schools have woven these lessons into their curriculum. Students study the social conditions that allowed organized crime to thrive, poverty, corruption, and lack of opportunity, and brainstorm ways to prevent such forces from gaining ground again. They interview elders, record oral histories, and create projects that celebrate unity. Teachers emphasize that heroism often begins with small, quiet acts: a coded message, a notebook of observations, a neighbor who dares to speak up. Businesses, too, reflect the spirit of rebirth. Cafes serve Freedom Blend coffee and pastries named after the brave informants who once risked their lives. Shops sell handcrafted jewelry shaped like lanterns, representing the light that finally broke the darkness. Visitors leave not only with souvenirs, but also with a sense of hope, inspired by how a community once terrorized turned itself into a symbol of possibility. The town council continues to guard against complacency. Regular community safety drills, transparent budgeting, and open-door police forums ensure that no one ever feels voiceless again. Residents volunteer for neighborhood watches, not out of lingering fear, but as a shared commitment to one another. The phrase "never again" is more than a slogan. It's a daily practice of accountability and care. Every year on the anniversary of the Great Raid, the town holds a lantern walk at dusk. Families gather at the square, each person carrying a small light. Together they move through the streets once patrolled by armed gang members, their path ending at the stone monument engraved with the names of those who resisted. There is music, quiet reflection, and a moment of silence to honor those who endured and those who did not survive. The glow of hundreds of lanterns paints the night with a gentle, defiant brilliance. Beyond the celebration, the town has become a model for other regions grappling with organized crime. Delegations arrive from distant cities to study its community police partnerships and its programs for youth employment and education. The Retired Teacher's Journal, once a secret lifeline, is now archived in a national museum as an example of grassroots intelligence work that changed the course of history. Though scars remain in the memories of older residents, they no longer define the present. Instead, they serve as quiet reminders of the strength found in unity. What was once a place of whispered fears is now a beacon for anyone who doubts the power of ordinary people to stand against extraordinary danger. The Iron Fangs wanted a town frozen in terror. What they left behind is a community that walks openly in the light, unafraid and unbroken. As the years continued to unfold, the town's transformation feels almost like folklore, yet everyone who lived through the dark era knows it is entirely real. New generations grow up hearing the story not as a warning alone, but as a testament to how collective action can change the course of history. Grandparents who once whispered instructions for hiding now tell their grandchildren bedtime stories about courage and neighborly trust. Those memories, though painful, have become a shared inheritance that binds families together. Seasonal festivals highlight this legacy of resilience. During spring, a Day of Light celebration fills the streets with lanterns and music. Local youth perform plays dramatizing key moments from the resistance. The coded chalk marks on barns, the midnight meetings where neighbors plotted how to share intelligence, the final raid that shattered the gang's power. Each performance renews the community's pledge to remain united, to never allow fear or corruption to seep into daily life again. The cultural center, once an abandoned warehouse, now hosts workshops for neighboring towns that face rising crime. Police officers, teachers, and activists gather to learn about grassroots intelligence, community watch structures, and the importance of transparent governance. Visitors often leave struck by how an ordinary population, without heavy weapons or political clout, toppled a network of violent criminals through patience and solidarity. What happened here has become a blueprint for other regions. Economically, the town thrives. Family businesses that once struggled to pay extortion fees now export handcrafted goods, organic produce, and artisanal foods to cities across the country. Tourists bring steady income, eager to experience the markets and hear first-hand accounts of survival. A small local newspaper, resurrected after years of silence, publishes investigative pieces that hold officials accountable, ensuring that the hard-earned culture of transparency endures. Even with prosperity, the community remains vigilant. Town meetings continue to draw large crowds, where residents openly discuss concerns about security, education, and infrastructure. The police station operates with community oversight, and a citizens' board regularly audits its procedures. These safeguards are more than bureaucracy. They are symbols of a promise that no gang or corrupt official will ever again choke the town into silence. On quiet evenings, older residents sometimes walk the same streets where armed men once prowled. They pause at the stone monument in the central square, running their fingers across the engraved names of neighbors who resisted or suffered. Some shed tears, others simply smile, proud of how far they have come. The monument is neither grim nor grandiose. It is a steady reminder that vigilance and unity can overcome even the most ruthless foes. The Retired Teacher's Journal, now preserved in a national archive, draws scholars and students from around the world. Its pages, once a dangerous secret, detail the slow, careful gathering of information that ultimately guided the decisive raid. For historians and criminologists, it is a treasure trove of lessons about the power of ordinary people to confront organized crime without losing their humanity. Today, the town is not defined by what it survived, but by what it built afterward. Its identity rests on creativity, cooperation, and an unshakable belief in community. The Iron Fangs are a chapter in its history, but not its headline. As the sun sets over lively markets and children's laughter echoes through the alleys, the message is unmistakable. Fear may have visited once, but it has no permanent home here. The town's story continues to ripple outward, inspiring visitors and shaping the identity of everyone who calls it home. What was once a place known only for tragedy has become a symbol of resilience and possibility. Travelers arrive curious about the legend of the Iron Fangs, but they leave talking about the people, the shopkeepers, farmers, teachers, and children, who refuse to let terror define their future. Each year, the Lantern Walk grows larger. Guests from neighboring regions join residents to trace the historic path through streets that were once gang checkpoints. As the soft glow of hundreds of lanterns reflects off the stone monument in the square, speeches give way to music and spontaneous dancing. Elders share quiet stories while children dart between clusters of friends, their laughter carrying far into the night. The festival is not just remembrance, it is a living declaration that unity is stronger than fear. Education remains at the heart of the town's renewal. High school students collaborate on oral history projects, recording interviews with grandparents and documenting forgotten corners where key events unfolded. Some compile interactive digital maps of safe houses and resistance routes, blending technology with family memory. Their work finds its way into national museums and online archives, ensuring the lessons endure well beyond the town's borders. The economy, once crippled by extortion and fear, now thrives on creativity and trust. Cooperative bakeries, artisanal workshops, and eco-friendly guest houses welcome visitors year-round. Local coffee blends carry names like Freedom Roast and Dawn Resilience, tiny reminders of what the community overcame. Profits fund scholarships for students who wish to study law enforcement, social work, or community planning, fields chosen deliberately to strengthen the values that saved the town. Despite the progress, no one pretends that the scars have vanished. Some families still bear private grief for loved ones lost or missing. Yet these memories no longer paralyze. Instead, they serve as a quiet warning to stay vigilant. Neighborhood watch groups meet monthly, not in fear, but as a ritual of care. The police station, once a symbol of corruption, now hosts open forums where residents review safety data and propose improvements. Transparency is treated as the town's strongest shield. Occasionally, former members of the Iron Fangs petition to return after serving long sentences. Community discussions around these cases are thoughtful and sometimes heated. The guiding principle is accountability balanced with the possibility of redemption. Those who show genuine change may find cautious acceptance, participating in service projects or sharing their experiences with youth as cautionary tales. The town understands that breaking the cycle of violence requires more than punishment. It demands opportunities to rebuild lives. Scholars and policymakers continue to study the town's transformation. Conferences highlight how an isolated community, armed mostly with courage and careful communication, dismantled an organized crime network. Articles in international journals cite the retired teacher's journal as evidence of the power of grassroots intelligence. Delegations from cities facing rising gang activity come to walk the streets, speak with residents, and learn how trust can become a formidable defense. As dusk settles over the hills, the town's lights twinkle like a constellation against the dark. The air hums with the ordinary sounds of evening. Children chasing each other, musicians rehearsing for the next festival, neighbors calling goodnight across narrow lanes. What was once a battleground is now simply home, a vibrant, self-reliant community that turned terror into triumph. The Iron Fangs sought to control every heartbeat, but today the rhythm belongs solely to the people, steady and free. Decades after the Iron Fangs were dismantled, the town's story still feels alive in every brick and mural. Visitors strolling through the market see children racing between stalls, their laughter echoing where silence once reigned. The sight is ordinary now, yet locals know it was earned through extraordinary sacrifice. Community pride has become a daily practice rather than a single celebration. The town council, made up of teachers, farmers, and small business owners, keeps public records transparent and invites residents to monthly open-floor meetings. Anyone can question budgets, policing strategies, or development plans. That open dialogue, born from years of secrecy and fear, ensures that power can never again hide in the shadows. The cultural center continues to expand its reach. Scholars visit to examine the original notes of the retired teacher whose quiet documentation changed the course of history. Students from across the country arrive for internships, learning how ordinary citizens built a system of mutual trust strong enough to topple a violent empire. The once secret journal is now a national treasure, its pages displayed behind glass for all to see. Young people who never experienced the gang's rule carry the story forward with creativity. Local musicians compose songs blending traditional folk melodies with modern rhythms, turning the town's history into music festivals that draw audiences from far beyond the region. Poets recite verses about lanterns, resilience, and the triumph of collective courage. Art installations appear in quiet alleyways, each piece a reminder that beauty can grow where fear once lived. Economically, the town thrives as a model of cooperative development. Former gang hideouts have been converted into guest houses and cafes, their walls lined with photographs of neighbors rebuilding together. Profits from tourism fund scholarships in criminology, community organizing, and mental health counseling, careers chosen to strengthen the very defenses that once saved the town. Many scholarship recipients return after their studies, eager to serve the community that gave them their start. Still, the people remain mindful that safety is never permanent. Annual safety drills and neighborhood watch trainings are woven into everyday life, not as grim reminders but as celebrations of shared responsibility. Children learn early that looking out for one another is as natural as greeting a neighbor. The phrase, "never again," isn't etched only on the monument in the square. It lives in these quiet habits, a promise renewed with each passing year. Even the natural landscape reflects renewal. The hillsides, once scarred by abandoned routes used for smuggling, are now hiking trails dotted with wildflowers. Families picnic where lookouts once stood guard, and the old rail line has become a greenway that links the town to neighboring villages. Every path tells a story of reclamation. When dusk settles and lanterns begin to glow along the main street, the transformation feels complete yet ongoing. The town that once trembled now teaches. Its people proved that unity, patience, and courage can outlast violence, and that a community's heartbeat cannot be silenced forever. The Iron Fangs sought to rule through fear. Instead, they forged a legacy of strength that illuminates each evening's gentle light.